From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Coming up today, K-State's Romulo Lollato will report once again from the Kansas Wheat Tour. He'll recap the wheat crop estimates made by his tour group yesterday as they scouted fields in west central, southwest, and south central Kansas. Also today, K-State's Sarah Lancaster will go over the herbicide options for you corn growers who weren't able to put down your pre-emergence treatments because of uncooperative weather this past month. And from the Farm Service Agency, Chris Thurston covers, among other things, 2 USDA drought assistance opportunities for you livestock producers. And further ahead, this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Raymond Cloyd on controlling assorted insect pests currently in home landscapes and vegetable gardens. All that here on Agriculture Today. You are tuned in to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Thanks for being along with us. Another report now from the Wheat Quality Council's 2022 Hard Winter Wheat Tour of Kansas and adjacent states. Day 2 yesterday. This is the third and final day of the tour. Joining us, Romulo Lollato, wheat production specialist with K-State Research and Extension. Romulo, we want to take a glimpse back to what you and your tour goers saw as you traveled through west central, southwest, and then south central Kansas yesterday. And just to set the stage here, expectations were at a relatively low level going into that stretch of the tour, were they not?
Hi, Eric. Yes, absolutely. Expectations were for a below-average crop, especially as we left in the morning yesterday from Colby and went south. In my route in particular, we went just straight south all the way until Lakin, and so there in Kearney County. And what I was mentioning to my group in the morning was, well, things are going to get worse before they get better, right? Because that far southwest corner of the state is where drought stress has been impacting the region for the longest within the state of Kansas. That's also a region that had a considerable amount of heat stress in the last few weeks. And before that, they were probably the ones that were in the more sensitive stage when we had freeze damage. So pretty much everything that could kind of go wrong this season, we would expect in that southwest corner of the state. And indeed, as we were traveling south, things were deteriorating from Colby to that Lakin region. And probably the yields that we were sampling, they would be ranging from anywhere from 25 to 35 to perhaps 40 bushels per acre in a wheat fallow situation. And they were just in that 10 to 15 bushels range for wheat following corn, just like continuous cropping. So a very, very harsh conditions. The crop was many times just like boot height, and the heads were out. They had 6 to 8 spikelets there, where many times you can find up to 15, 16, 17 in a good season. And not only the size of the spikelets, but the number of the heads there as well. They were very, very reduced compared to what we could expect. So there was potential in that region. Indeed, we could see quite a bit of white heads from those freeze events that we have had in the past. But one thing that kind of impressed me was the amount of white heads that we were seeing due to heat stress. The symptom is a little bit different if you're looking for, well, if you're seeing in the field, for example, an entire head that has been taken out by freeze, and then just the top of the head as well, and then another plant may have only the symptoms in the bottom, and you may have some funky-looking heads like a trap in the boot and things like this. Those are pretty usual symptoms of freeze damage. Yesterday, I was seeing actually what most of the cars were seeing actually after talking was just like entire tealers that were actually white, just like a single tealer in a plant that was entirely white. That's usually not root rot. That's usually not with stem maggot or freeze damage either. And the one thing that we could associate that back to was heat stress damage. In many fields, they have been up to 10 to 15% of those heads are actually white because of that heat stress. And so I think that the heat event that we have had in the last few days really took a toll on the crop, especially in that southwest part of the state.
Interestingly, there were reports that certain irrigated wheat fields were showing ill effects of heat and weren't looking as great as they should.
That as well. The heat stress will affect both irrigated and dryland crops. They should have a larger effect when they are combined with drought stress, right? But I would expect as well that effect on the irrigated fields as well.
Any idea, Romulo, before we move further into south central Kansas, as to the level of field abandonment, what you might expect? And there are some tough decisions that producers are having to face right now, given high wheat prices.
Yes, definitely some tough decisions, because if in a normal year, maybe a crop that maybe 20, 25 bushels per acre with a wheat of $4 a bushel, it's kind of easier to take the decision and just say, okay, well, let's give it a try with a summer crop, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this year, with $12, $13 a bushel, growers might make some profit even, or at least break even at that low level. And so, some tough decisions. In terms of area abandonment, we were not quantifying that in the car, so we were not necessarily taking notes about that. Mm-hmm. The USDA number that was put out, about 6%, I had the feeling that was probably in the low level of what we're going to see this year. So I guess it could be higher than that because of the amount of fields that were actually in that very tough conditions, especially considering that I didn't visit the worst part of the state, right, which is further west and further south than where I was. More likely, we could see 8 or even more in terms of area abandonment.
Well, then as you traveled from the Lakin area, generally, toward the east and eventually arriving at Wichita, the anticipation was that you would see better wheat, and apparently you did, but there are even drought indications in south central Kansas that you noted.
Absolutely. So, as I had mentioned before, I told my group, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And that was true, but it took much longer to get better than I was anticipating. So we were actually heading straight east bound there from Kearney County, driving through Finney County, Hodgman, then through that county and Stafford County, going into Reno. From our route, I was expecting to start seeing much better wheat, at least around the Pratt County that we were traveling by as well, in Kingman County, actually. But even in that region, conditions were very, very tough. We could really tell that the crop was, the feeling that I had is almost like the crop was burning out there, right? It's just like between the drought that was expanded into that the western south central part of the state, and the heat stress that they have been through in the last few weeks as well, because they were exposed to very high temperatures in the last few weeks. The crop is in tough shape out there. It is in very tough shape out there. It's almost not until we are getting into Sedgwick County or actually Reno County or Sedgwick County that we start seeing a little bit better wheat. So that Kingman County, Pratt County, again, perhaps because those soils might not have the same water holding capacity and nutrient holding capacity than some of the soils out in western locations. And so in our route, we end up ending with a day at about 33 bushels per acre. And that was very close to what we were eyeballing the crop as well. So every field that went in and that we sampled, we were trying to get a good feeling as well before calculating of, okay, what's this field going to yield just based on its looks. And it came back very close to the 33. Now, the overall average of the tour was higher. It was 37, and then when you average that out with the previous day, we're very close to that number that the USDA put out. But I had the feeling we were going to be lower. We had a couple of routes there that they came up with some pretty high numbers. I'm not sure if they just went into more irrigated fields or if they happened to just at a better spot. They didn't go through those routes. But I was expecting, that yesterday we would have closed around that 33, 34 bushels per acre, which is about what we were seeing in our car.
Well, all the tour goers will convene for the final time later today in Manhattan. They'll compare notes and come up with a group estimate on 2022 winter wheat production here in Kansas. But the evidence is ringingly clear this is not going to be a stellar year by any means for Kansas wheat production.
No, not at all. And I still am a firm believer that our growers are doing the best they can. And so whenever we think of their genetic adoption, I'm thinking that we're talking to growers that are, for the most part, adopting recent genetics. And I think that has helped we not look worse than we do. And as you know me, I am a big proponent of good agronomic practices as well. I think that those are at least as important as selecting the right variety for that field, if not more, depending on the situation. And so, based on what we were seeing yesterday, huge differences between neighboring fields, field to field, just based on how we could tell the crop was being managed, whether it was a continuous crop or a crop after a fallow period, or whether it was depending on row spacing, depending on many other factors, residue amount. And so, again, I think that we're probably getting as much as we could out of this crop, but unfortunately the weather conditions are still what's going to be the major driver of yield in the state, and those were very harsh from the beginning of the season, consequently bringing our yield down.
Well, curious to see what the tour goers come up with as a final overall production estimate for the state of Kansas later on this afternoon. It's been an interesting run the last couple of days. We'll find out what day 3 shows and go from there. Romulo, thank you for filing these reports from the tour. We appreciate it very much, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you, Eric. It's always a pleasure.
And by the way, you can keep track of what Romulo is putting out from the tour on Facebook or Twitter at KSU Wheat. That's at KSU Wheat. Keep up with all of that. Romulo Lollato is a wheat production specialist, K-State Research and Extension, touching base with us once again from the 2022 Hard Winter Wheat Tour of Kansas and adjacent states, sponsored by the Wheat Quality Council this week. And we'll be back on Agriculture Today. We're back now on This Agriculture Today, and these next few moments for you corn producers who may not have gotten on that pre-emergence herbicide before your corn emerged. We're talking once again with Sarah Lancaster, Weed Management Specialist, K-State Research and Extension. A few folks got caught in this situation, Sarah, and you've been talking with corn growers about the alternatives from here forward.
Right. So, one of the things we've had this spring, Eric, is a really tough time finding good spray days, right? We've had conditions that are good for planting maybe, but not so much for spraying. And so one of the things we have to worry about is getting the corn in the ground and then having it come up before we get our pre-spit on. The good thing about this, though, Eric, is that most of the herbicides that we're using for our pre-emergence applications in our corn can be applied over the top of small corn. In fact, some of them are even labeled for, what we call a split shot application, where we intend to put about half of the rate down before planting and then about half of the rate down after planting. So it's not a disastrous situation, but there are some things that folks just need to, be aware of as those conditions change.
One of the things to sort out here, you say most of our pre-emergence herbicides can safely be applied to small corn, but not all of them.
Right. The one that I pulled out in this e-update that we're kind of pulling this discussion from is flumioxazin. We're using a lot of flumioxazin as a residual in a lot of our systems. And, it actually does have plant back interval ahead of corn depending on the rate that you use. And it certainly cannot be applied to emerged crops. So things like Valor cannot be applied to emerged corn, or you won't have corn.
But beyond that class, the rest of the common herbicides we'd use for pre-emergence treatment are fair game here?
Generally speaking. So, we rely a lot on atrazine, right? Atrazine is kind of our workhorse for corn and grain sorghum weed control. The Group 15 products, so those are we call them very long-chain fatty acid synthesis inhibitors. Those are things like Dual, Warrant, Harness, Zidua, Outlook. Those are all examples of Group 15 herbicides, and they actually can be applied to quite large corn. And we recommend that group of products a lot for that layered residual application that we talk about so much in terms of keeping that crop weed free through canopy. And then the other group of herbicides that we rely on a lot for our corn premixes are the group 27 herbicides, the HPPD inhibiting herbicides, the bleachers. And so that would be, really Callisto or mesotrione is probably the main one we think of there. Balance or isoxafludel also is in that category. And so there are a lot of premixes that have those different combinations of products, and they can all go over the top of corn.
So latitude, as we think here about pre-emergence applications, if the weeds haven't asserted themselves yet, but there are those occasions where the weeds have too come along with that fledgling corn, and there are some added herbicide treatment possibilities here.
Yeah, so when we're thinking about emerged weeds, we kind of are in this era where the go-tos are Roundup or Liberty, so glyphosate or glufosinate. And so, most of our corn hybrids are going to be resistant to one or the other or both of those two herbicides. So those can continue to be, the go-to. Other things we can think about would be dicamba. It has a label for application to emerged corn. Spike through 8 inches is the growth stage restrictions there. So for a half a pound of active per acre. There are some other things we can think about that are going to control emerged weeds and that we might use in burn down. And the big one there would be paraquat or gramoxone, right? We don't have any crops that are resistant to paraquat applications. And so we need to...
So that's a no-no.
That's a no-no.
Yeah.
That's a no-go. The other product in that group would then be a newer product called a Reviton that I've heard a few folks are interested in using this spring. So that needs to come out of any herbicide applications if you have to switch from a pre-emergence to a post-emergence.
And you noted in the article in the E-Update, the use of adjuvants would be almost essential here with an application to emerged weeds in this case.
Yeah, that's right, Eric. So even things like atrazine that we talked about does have some post-emergence activity, but in order to really get that, you need to put that surfactant with it. So be sure and double check the labels for which particular adjuvant you need. A lot of them will be crop oil or NIS. Some will require AMS as well. Some don't require anything. The other thing to be cognizant of is, especially with our herbicides that contain balance or isoxafludel and adding crop oil post-emergence, you really increase the potential for crop injury or a negative crop response when you do that. So you get better weed control, but also better crop response as well.
All of this, of course, is covered in detail in the 2022 Chemical Weed Control for Field Crops Guide, and that is available through your local extension office, or you can go online to the K-State Agronomy website and take a look directly there. But there are alternatives. There are possibilities for producers, even if they missed that optimum window for a pre-emergence application, is the point.
That's right. All is not lost. Just keep plugging.
Hey, thanks for the input. As always, Sarah, we'll talk again soon.
Thanks.
Sarah Lancaster, Weed Management Specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Now, changing gears on this segment, you're due another update from the state headquarters of the Farm Service Agency here in Kansas, and over from that office here in Manhattan is Chris Thurston. Chris is the outreach coordinator with the Kansas FSA. And one of the primary things you wanted to pass along today, Chris, the results are now in from the most recent General Conservation Reserve Program sign-up.
Absolutely. So we had about 2 million acres nationwide. Nearly 219,000 of those were Kansas acres, and they were accepted. We had a 98 overall acceptance rate for the state, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. A lot of our county offices have begun notifying producers with submitted offers. And those producers with the accepted offers are going to have 15 days from the date of their notification letter to go ahead and confirm their offer with the county office and to begin their conservation planning process. Mm-hmm. Producers should be aware that the timely response for the correspondence to their FSA office is going to be paramount for these offers.
Great to hear that there was such an extremely high acceptance rate for those bids into this latest CRP. Now, those who didn't, to put it this way, make the cut, can still participate in the CRP through another avenue, right?
Absolutely. So producers with unacceptable offers may have options for the continuous CRP enrollment. We encourage the producers interested in the continuous CRP enrollment on expiring CRP acreages to contact their local county FSA office as soon as possible. And this is just to ensure that all necessary actions can be completed and approved by the September 30th, 2022 deadline.
Right. Again, those of you who did make it into this latest general CRP, 15 days after that notification letter arrives to confirm your participation. Be aware of that and have that dialogue with your local FSA personnel to square that business away. You've a handful of other farm program items to pass along and stemming from various circumstances that producers may need assistance in. One of those has to do with the pandemic yet, Chris. We can't shake that. An assistance for those hog producers that could use it.
So our spot market hog pandemic program, May the 20th is going to be the last day for a swine producer to apply for their benefits under the spot market hog pandemic program, which can provide supporting sales documents of all spot market sales between the 16th of April 2020 and September 1st of 2020.
May the 20th is this Friday, just to note. So if you're a producer who would like to be part of that, why, be sure to sign up for that through your local FSA as well. And producers out there, livestock producers broadly, are contending with drought conditions yet in the state of Kansas, and there are a couple of other forms of aid here for those producers, Chris. One, to help producers with feed transportation. Outline that if you would.
So our livestock producers with qualifying drought, D2, drought monitor situations for 8 consecutive weeks, or D3 and 4, during the normal grazing period, they can be eligible for transportation costs of purchasing additional feed for eligible livestock. Mm-hmm. Assistance is provided for the cost of transportation above 25 miles, not to exceed 1,000 miles per the purchased livestock feed load. Required documentation includes the number of truckloads of livestock feed purchased and hauled, as well as mileage per truckload hauled.
And there's a companion assistance program, again, for those who are mired in drought to help with the cost of transportation. You might explain what that's about.
Absolutely. So for our livestock transportation costs, these livestock producers with qualifying droughts, again, D2 for 8 consecutive weeks, D3 or 4, during the normal grazing period can be eligible for transportation of cost of livestock one time in addition to their forage grazing. Assistance is provided for cost of transportation, again, above 25 miles, not to exceed 1,000 miles. And then their required documentation for that also includes the number of truckloads of livestock hauled for the one-time move, as well as their mileage per truckload hauled.
Local FSA folk can help producers walk through their eligibility for either of those, correct?
Absolutely. We just, for specific details, we just encourage everybody to reach out to their local county office for the specificities of each of those programs.
Once more, if you need assistance for moving livestock to better grazing opportunities or, again, to move feed to your livestock, both spawned by the drought, check out those through your local FSA personnel. Chris, thank you for coming over.
Thanks, Eric.
He's the outreach coordinator with the State Farm Service Agency headquarters based here in Manhattan. That's Chris Thurston. And we'll be back shortly here on Agriculture Today. We're back now on Agriculture Today, and our weekly horticulture segment comes your way now. This time with horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd, K-State Research and Extension alongside. Insects are full bore right now in lawn and garden. We'll cover some of the common problems and what to do about them. And not surprisingly, Raymond, one of those would be bagworms. We're into that season now where control measures against those should be thought of anyway, right now, right?
Absolutely, Eric. I know everybody's on pins and needles ready to go after those bagworms, but give it a couple more weeks. But again, when you start seeing those 1/8-inch, 1/4-inch bags on your trees or shrubs, that's when you want to get out there with your sprays. Typically, you could use the Bacillus thuringiensis Kierstaki, which is the bacteria that works on caterpillars, or spinosad. Those are the ones we use early. And if you have to get thorough coverage of all plant parts, and you may have to make repeat applications because not all the eggs or not all the caterpillars emerge from the egg simultaneously. And, of course, you do know they balloon in from other areas. But if you're diligent about it, take it from I've had experience. You spray early, get them. You don't have any big bags later on your trees. There's going to be an article on our newsletter coming about that, but just hold on. And with the amount of heat we had with degree days, it looks like they should be coming up in a couple weeks. But just be ready. Yeah.
You say, Raymond, also you're hearing reports of a variety of aphids on landscape ornamentals?
Yes, and not just landscape ornamentals, Eric, but also some vegetables. And this is the time of year when plants are putting out vegetative growth. It's rich in nitrogen. It's new. It's easy for them to feed upon. That's when we normally get problems with aphids. And, of course, aphids can reproduce so fast in a short period of time, especially at the temperatures we're experiencing. So if they're on your trees and shrubs, like a maple or a spirea, you can just take a high-pressure water spray and dislodge them. If you have other issues, you can use insecticidal soaps, horticultural oils, or some of the commercially available contact insecticides that are out there. Yeah.
As far as aphids on vegetable crops, though, a different tact, some sort of control product would be appropriate here?
Yeah, you just have to make sure it is registered for vegetables. That's why we like the insecticidal soaps, which is the potassium, salt, and fatty acids, and then the mineral oils. They're contact, short residual, and they're less likely to be a problem on vegetables. Of course, this is the time of year where you don't have any fruit on the vegetables, but you just want to keep the problem as low as possible because, again, aphid populations can really quote explode within a short period of time.
Anything else aside from the aphid family at work on vegetable gardens right now?
Well, that's a good question, Eric. We have a series of insects. Colorado potato beetle is out there. The adults are feeding on potato. And, of course, they're causing the damage. And one thing you can do is just go out and pick the adults off and put them in soapy water. The harlequin bug's out feeding on horseradish. And, again, you just pick them off or vacuum them is probably the best way to deal with them. And then flea beetles are feeding on potato also. It's a little more difficult. You can vacuum them up or spray with an insecticide. But at this point, it's probably best to do like physical removal, vacuum them up off the plant, especially when the populations are low. Yeah.
Keep those chemical responses to a minimum at this point of the season until those crops become more established. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, or populations are getting higher. Yeah, and again, oils and soaps are always our first recommendation, and then you can go with your products, malathion or Sevin or some of the pyrethroids like bifenthrin, permethrin, those types that are registered. Now, when you go buy a product, make sure that vegetables are on the label.
There is, of course, information on all of these pests available through extension resources out of K-State. We don't want folks to lose sight of that, Raymond.
No, we don't. In fact, there's a bagworm extension publication that provides easy-to-follow practical information about dealing with bagworms with use of insecticides. And it's in that publication. You can download it on our Kansas State University website, Department of Entomology website. And we also, I believe, have a extension publication on aphids.
It's all out there.
Yep.
Just take advantage of it and go to entomology.ksu.edu for a direct route to all of that good published information out of K-State. We'll talk again in a few weeks. Raymond, thank you.
I look forward to it, Eric. Thank you.
Raymond Cloyd, horticultural entomologist, K-State Research and Extension, and that is this week's Horticulture segment. As always, thanks for listening in. Please rejoin us right here tomorrow. Until then, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.